Thank you, David, and thanks for always having me here. Okay, tonight I'm going to talk about authentic. The reason is that it has been chosen as the word of the year by Merriam-Webster for 2023. I know we're in 2024, but always at the end of the year they make this choice. Is this a little bit? Can you turn
it sounds like we have a little bit of
stand back a bit, maybe. Is that good?
Sounds odd.
Or can I turn?
It's not unusual.
And in my discussion with Wesley, what to talk about, because I'm always welcomed here and have the wonderful privilege to choose what I want to talk about. I thought of several options, and one of the reasons was that it was a word of the year. I had talked about it, I think 3 or 4 years ago, but it's also something that I found interesting in relation to artificial intelligence. And I know that many people are worried about artificial intelligence, or at least curious. I'm curious, and I thought that's an excellent opportunity to talk about real problems with fake creativity. So my lecture will be structured in 4 parts. First of all, I'm going to talk about who am I, and it's a little bit more than just my name, and you'll see. Then what is authentic, then what changes for us in design, in our work, and how could we respond? I don't have perfect answers. My job tonight is not as much to feed you answers, but to make you think, and hopefully I will succeed with that. So who am I? I'm Wolfgang Joensson. I run an office in Paris and in Corona del Mar, and I have a partner in Switzerland, so we are this boutique-y two-man office with 3 locations, which I like to mention because it sounds kind of cool, and it is. And the reason why, I have to explain why I live in Paris. You may not know that, but it's every woman's dream to move to Paris and have a German boyfriend, and that's how I met my American girlfriend. And she decided after a while, Paris is wonderful, but in winter it's nicer here. And so we live half here, we divide our time equally. I do design, and that is the scope of my services. I'm a studied product designer, industrial designer. There are lots of definitions around, so I'm not very picky, but I also do packaging, interface, graphic, and corporate design. I'll show you some samples of my work in case you have not had the chance to look at my website or weren't aware that I have one, which is perfectly forgivable. So I do medical devices, electronic devices. I have some experience in coffee machines. I never try to specialize, but if you do some project well, then people in that area will come back to you. But what I like about the job is that I'm always confronted with new and different things. So yes, I still like to do coffee machines, but I also love it when somebody comes with something that I've never worked on before. So clocks, watches, men's grooming equipment. And then there's packaging. The middle one won an award in New York. And on the right there's a luxury, it's a $5,000 razor in an appropriately luxurious box which can be transformed into a humidor. And then there's interface design or UI, UX design, whatever the label of the week is, because it seems, it's a fairly recent thing, and there's a lot of terminology, and some of that I fear is used to make it sound more spectacular, more secretive than it is. It's actually to design anything that happens on the screen, and what I find fascinating about it is that there is an aspect of time. Now this happens and now that happens, which in 3-dimensional product design you don't have that often, or not to that extent. And it's also the logic, how to navigate through, if not a website, then an app, which I find challenging and therefore inspiring. When I do interface design, I present the work to the client, and he decides for a certain path, and comes the laborious job to specify everything for the people that implement that. And this is just an example how, you say the font sizes and the distances, and what mouse rollover color change you have, and so on and so on. It gets very complex. And that's where my German tenacity and diligence is helpful in making sure everything is precise. There's also connected to that something I enjoy very much is designing little icons. It's like a visual alphabet. And of course some are just derivatives of, you have a cross or a pause, international pause, but then the only thing you have to worry about is that the line thickness corresponds to the font of the interfaces that you've designed. But there's some that you really have to come up with how can you visualize it so it still makes sense, because there's always a point where writing the word out may be easier, although, in international products, the problem is that you have to do it in different languages. And also it always uses more space on the interface, which is usually a premium. Then I do graphic design. I'm not a graphic designer. I earn my living doing my studies. I do enjoy doing logos, but I'm not, flyers, and I'm also not doing really websites, posters. That's layout, that's not my forte, but I really like doing logos. And when I bundle all that together, and sometimes I have this opportunity, then I say I'm doing corporate design, so I'm responsible for the entirety of a company, and on the left is South Korea's largest watch manufacturer, where I did an over 100-page manual and decided what clothes the people wear in the factory and what's on the factory front and the packaging and everything. I designed watches for them. I worked on the logo, and the same I did for the Center Part, which is a startup company on the right too, where I did packaging, product design, point of sales, everything related to the brand. So I want to say something about thinking straight, and that's more of a personal introduction. Before I start to talk about authentic, about thinking straight, just don't, Everybody can think straight. You can probably automate that easiest. And I see a value in doing what the French has a special expression for. It's sauter le coq à l'âne, which means to jump from the rooster to the donkey. And some people say that is irritating, and it is, why do you do that? Well, it's not to annoy people. And my girlfriend, she calls me the Prince of Non Sequitur, and that's an AI-generated image that shows me in full regalia. I see that as a quality in design. If you can make connections that other people can't make that easily, if you are inspired by things, it's not a matter of attention deficit, it's a matter of focusing your attention deliberately on other things. It's like an extended attention. I highly recommend that. I hate it when people say, don't compare apples to oranges, because I find it very interesting to compare apples to oranges. If you compare apples to apples, you can measure the weight, the size, you can say the color is this, it has a leaf, it doesn't, and then you're pretty much done, and the taste, of course, But when you compare them to oranges, you go further. And Richard Saul Warman, who has written a fantastic book, not only one, the one that I'm talking about is called Information Anxiety. I'll probably not be able to get it anymore. He is one of the two inventors of the TED lecture series. He said basically you have to understand the difference between information and facts. And facts per se are pretty boring, If you know, for instance, that Los Angeles has 11,000 restaurants, that's a fact. It becomes interesting when you know that Berlin, with almost the same population, has 15,000, and Paris, the ratio is 3.8 to 3.1 million citizens, has 44,000. Then there's information. That is interesting. That all of a sudden makes you think, wow, did the French eat more? And why are they slimmer than the Americans on average? Or are the portions smaller? Yes, they are. That does not explain the amount of restaurants. It's just the focus on food that the French have. But that is information for you. And again, you just followed me jumping from the rooster to the donkey. So when you consider that putting facts in relation creates information, then you understand why comparing apples to oranges gives you more of it and it's more valuable. It's a justification to do that. And I think you probably do that when you create designs. You can even compare people to bananas, and then you find out that they share 70% of the DNA. There are some internet sites that say 50%, and I read that. I'm not a molecular biologist, but apparently it's not that high. But I find that fascinating, and you can compare bananas to phones, and you think that doesn't make any sense. Of course, because that's the natural shape. And there was a designer, an American designer for the Bell Laboratory, researched the average distance and angle between mouth and ear, and therefore the perfect shape, geometric shape for a phone receiver. And today we know that any brick-shaped black object you hold to your face will allow you to make a phone call. So it doesn't negate the efforts that Richard Dreyfuss, that's the name of the designer, made, but it shows you that, yeah, you don't need a banana. And again, you followed me wildly hopping from one fact to the other. And we will now get more to the end of what I am about, and I'll give you, therefore, my definition of design. Because you know, when you lock up 3 designers in a room, they come out and they have 4 opinions about design. Every professional has a different way to describe what we are doing. I say design is a professional activity to develop innovative solutions for specific markets or brands by a way of an iterative process involving analytic and synthetic steps. What does that mean? Well, first of all, it's professional. It means I'm going to charge money for that, you know, and I want you to do the same. Never design for free. It's not half the fun, believe me. And then you develop it. It just doesn't come to your mind. You're working on something, you know. And the solutions are innovative. You're not going to do the same old, same old. You're coming up with something new, and you want to make a point of that. And it's for specific markets, you know. You have to know your target group. You have to know what you're doing. It also can be brands. And brands are the identity of a company. And therefore you design something that fits. You do that in an iterative process that doesn't mean anything else but doing it step by step. That is particularly important when you do medical devices, where you have to document those steps to get an FDA approval. But it's in general a good idea if you tell clients, oh, I'm not going to just go 2 weeks to the Bahamas and think it and come back with an idea. No, I'm working in a systematic way, and that's what you do. You work in a systematic way, but you also have more up your sleeve than just that. And it's a process. You're not just fishing for idea. There is a way how you know how to master to get to a result. You have to be credible about that. And it's analytic. Half the answer is provided by a good, smart way to put up a question, and we'll get back to that later. And there's some synthetic steps. That means you will create, you will generate something. And that's where AI comes into play, because that's what AI can do too. The question is, can it do it as well as you? So the question I ask myself when I think about artificial intelligence, why am I not afraid? Because I'm not. I'm simply not afraid because I've seen a lot of stuff happening in my career. You know, when I was in the first or second semester in design studies, and I remember that very well, I wasn't worried, I was anxious, I was really eager, but I also wanted to know, how do I become a good designer? What can I do to speed that up, and will I be a good designer? All these things that go through your head, I don't worry about that anymore. But I also don't worry about something like AI coming and interfering with the way how I work and messing it up in a negative way. This is how design was sold when I started to study. Not by me, this is not a sketch by me, this is just ripped off the internet. So people showed sketches to explain what they were thinking about, and then the clients looked at the sketches, and both people thought, well, we perfectly understand now what we're talking about. It's just that not everybody can read sketches, and not everybody has a three-dimensional imagination. And so some designers went out of the meeting and thought it went well, and the client saw something different in there, because, you know, the sketch is just the sketch. It's just a two-dimensional representation of something three-dimensional, which is why I don't like to cell design like that, and I've never done that. The same goes for renderings with color. I never do that. I've never done that. And I was quite lucky because the first job I got in a company in Germany was for frog design, and they never sold sketches. It's actually interesting because, you know, when you're a student, at least when I was a student, we did a technical drawing because the professor insisted on it. So once you've done the model, you've finished everything, then you sit down and do a technical drawing. But in reality, when you work in a design office, it's different. You want a model to be built. Downstairs, a super model making workshop with the best specialists of Germany. You have to tell them what they should do, and you do that with a technical drawing. So you have to be very good at it. You're measuring wrong, you put a wrong dimension on, they will build that. They're good model makers, they will come back and say, Wolfgang, what is that? You know, but you risk that they misunderstand, so you have to be precise. And like any language, if that's the only way how you can communicate, you learn it fairly fast. So after 3 months or so, I felt more confident, and I tried to always be very fast with that. Of course, nobody does this anymore. It was on a drawing board, you know, drawing machine. And as you don't even know what that is, and forget it because you don't need to know that, you know. But we showed full models, and these were kind of expensive. You know, that can usually be $5,000–$10,000 here for a model like that. And of course, nobody pays that anymore today because you have 3D print. You have hard models, they're way more expensive, at $20,000–$30,000. I remember we once did a model of a suitcase that you could open and the lock would work, and it was $120,000, you know. And it was for Louis Vuitton, so they had that money. So it didn't matter, but there's a reason why people did not do that. Some design office felt that it couldn't ask for that money from their client, and that the client wouldn't see the difference anyway, and they thought they'd get away with less professional work. But thank God I could always work like that. But then computer-aided design joined, and the playing field, so to speak, and we could have photorealistic renderings. Not a little sketch, but you could have an animation. You could turn it around and show that to a client. And the whole point of your work that you show to a client is to help him make a decision. Do I invest $500,000 in the case of a coffee machine, $2–3 million in the tooling, and then another $3 million in the marketing campaign for that design that Wolfgang shows me here? That's a difficult decision to make. It's one that you won't make, I won't make. It's your client that makes that. And for that, you want to provide him with the best material, with the best substance that makes him really feel confident that he's making the right decision. That is a pretty good thing, but it still doesn't show the relation between the product and the human body. Because it's just, you know, even if you can turn it around, you cannot put your hand on it. And that's where 3D printing comes in, you know, or before model making. But, you know, this here is printed, and I don't know, it goes quickly, you know. It's actually my business partner who printed that for me. That's why I don't know how long it took, I guess a couple of hours or what. And depending on the quality of the print, you can decide today colors and materials and everything. And then the client can take it in his hands and see, oh yeah, that feels good, and oh, that's too big, or the angle isn't right, or my hands don't fit. You can really make a lot of decisions based on a model you cannot make on the best photorealistic rendering. And the best solution today, of course, is a combination. Your photorealistic renderings that can show you what happens on the screen if you want, and you give them at the same time a model, a 3D printed model, and you can say the only thing better is a working model, but that usually is something that's only built before they go into production. So that was about me, my way of thinking, my way of working, and now we talk about what is authentic. And whenever I ask myself that kind of question, I go and look in a dictionary. Those are books with pages, or today it's online, of course. And here you see it's not false information or imitation, real, actual, it's true to one's own personality. There are examples. I hope you can read it in the back. So I'll go into the details in a moment. Worthy of acceptance, or something very positive, authentic. You know, sounds good, you know. You don't want to be not authentic, right? And conforming to an original so as to reproduce essential features, or made or done the same way as an original. For all those of you who think that's now pretty clear, I'll ask some questions that came to mind. The first example they take is a Cockney accent. Do you know what a Cockney accent is? Cockney it's also called rhyming slang. It's actually more than an accent, it's a language, and it's an artificial language. It has been created by Londoners at a time when they felt that whenever I'm selling a buddy some wood or so, then the policeman understands it and says, well, how many taxes do you pay? And I don't want to pay taxes. So I'm not saying, the wood store, my secret stash shop, the road and around the corner, they say, up the frog and round the jarring armor, and nobody understands it who's not initiated. The policeman had no ideas what they were talking about. So it's like fake language. But you can have a true accent. So it's like an authentic thing of a fake origin. I just want to point that out. The second thing is true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. According to psychologists, your decisions shape your identity. We have a certain influence about our identity. And that is important to know. I mean, I cannot identify as a small person because I have a certain body height, I can't change that, but I can decide what I want to do in my life, what decisions I want to make that impacts the people around me, for example. That's my identity. I can decide how I want to respond to stimuli. Do I want to be always upset, enraged? Do I want to be more relaxed? There's a certain influence we have about that. So, true to our identity or to our character or personality, that is something we decide about. So if we decide something that we consider fake, if we pretend in our personality something that we aren't, and we don't even want to be, but we pretend that, is that then authentic, or how does that correspond? That's not quite clear to me. If we talk about the authenticated picture of our society, we have to know that how we perceive our society is highly subjective. People agree easily that the times we live in are cruel and are getting more violent, and when you look at statistics, that's just not the case. There's less and less violence around, and particularly in Europe. 100 and 200 years ago, people were beating their heads in all the time. So we have a lot less violence in Europe. The fact that still people are, prone to get murdered or beaten up doesn't mean that statistically that is relevant or increasingly happening. And then when we say reproduction of a colonial farmhouse, it's a reproduction, so it's not the farmhouse, So authentic doesn't mean it's the farmhouse itself. It can be just a reproduction. So originally we think, authentic just means real. No, it can be a depiction, a reproduction. And here, the last example of the Mexican fair, I like Mexican food, but it doesn't exist. I had a friend who spent half a year in Mexico and said, in the mountains they don't eat a lot of fish, and on the seaside they only eat fish. By the way, the Mexican cuisine is the only one that has UNESCO's heritage blessing and the only traditional cuisine in the world that has it. They also have the French cuisine, but that's a more modern thing. So, yeah, there is something like a Mexican cuisine, and then there isn't, To sum it up, authenticity, is subjective, and it's relative. And it can refer to a depiction, so not the actual thing, but a depiction or modification or reproduction or alterations of an object or an artifact or a concept. And when I researched, I found that even the real McCoy is not the real McCoy. It goes back to an 1858 poem, and I try to pronounce it exactly, of the real Mackay. So over the centuries, the Mackay became McCoy, and the real McCoy, we thought we could at least rely on that one. No, we can't. Talking with a lawyer friend, I said, so what's the authenticity concept for lawyers? And he told me that, you can authenticate a copy, when you have your passport or birth certificate, you can Kenya or wherever. It means to verify or certify that it's true to the original, but it will still just be a copy. So authentic does not mean necessarily that it's the real thing. It's just true to it. That's it. Art objects are normally authenticated by the artist signing at the bottom. And you know, Michelangelo Buonarroti, Leonardo da Vinci, Andy Warhol, or Jeff Koons. They are people that did not really create all the works that is assigned to them. They had, in the case of Jeff Koons, he has 200 employees. Andy Warhol had a factory. But even Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci had disciples that would work for them. They would not have been able to cut all that marble and paint all those paintings in the time. And it doesn't devalue it. It just means that even in the art world, we can assume that if an object has a signature, that is not necessarily made by that artist. Now, the areas of authenticities that I want to talk about tonight are three. There's a personal level, and it's you know, and I want you to think about that. It's always easy to say be who you are, but considering that your identity is shaped by your decisions, make decisions that lead you or guide you into the direction where you want to be. I'm not a person that quotes German bankers often, but I found a really nice quote. Oh, sorry, yeah. From Alfred Herrhausen, who was unfortunately murdered by terrorists in the 90s of the last century. He says, we have to say what we think, and then we have to do what we say, and then we have to be what we do. And that's also valuable as a designer, you know. If you have your convictions and they're remaining in your brain, you don't communicate them, you don't exchange them, then you're doing something bad to your convictions. You're not valuing them enough. You have to be authentic in that regard. It makes you understandable, it makes you more predictable, and in a good way, in business that's a good way, it makes you reliable. And that's what clients, in a business situation, what clients really like. And then you have to do what you say. You know? You cannot, so I'm going to do this and this and not live up to that. That will bring you repeat business. It's banal, but really you have to do that. And I really like also the last sentence, we have to be what we do. You have to make it your personality. You have to become that person that thinks. You have to really be authentic. I think that is something really worth striving for. That's authenticity value. The next part is creative authenticity. That refers to your work. So what do you want to be authentic about? When you design, how can you be more authentic? And I have some examples how not to do it or do it. And German design education is good. I'm happy I studied there. And it's a bit head-heavy, you know. They're talking very much in the concept. And nobody ever dares to say that design should be sexy. And I tell you, design should be sexy. It should be beautiful, you know. But since nobody can really define or measure beauty, the Germans are very nervous about that. You know, it's not really German, right? We were told, or we were taught to consider material honesty, which means that if you have a plastic piece and you chrome plate it, well, then you're lying. You make it look like metal, and it's still plastic underneath. How dare you? So I was raised like that, and I thought, no, honesty sounds intrinsically like a good idea, doesn't it? When I was working on alarm clocks as a young designer, my client gave me samples of electroplated alarm clock housings, you know, and in gaudiest colors you can imagine, and pink and turquoise, and it's really metallic, and it's like really gaudy. I thought, that's horrible. And I took them home, and I was looking at them and scratching. I realized that the metallic surface was a lot more scratch-proof than the plastic on its own. So I thought, so we're really talking about an improvement here. Why should I not do that? You know, and I think yes, you should do that. And a nice product which I have in my shower here, German Hans Bohr. You know, we in the design office where I was a young designer, we worked for the company, and now I always want to get that. not that I had my fingers on this one, it was a colleague. The lever is metal, it's cast metal, chrome-plated, polished, and the other part is plastic, and it's chrome-plated. And you know, they do a good job. It's really thick chrome plating, so that lasts a lifetime. And I don't think it's because it's cheaper, it's because the cheapest would probably be just a sheet metal drawn cover. But that wouldn't be so easy to make watertight around the lever. Then you couldn't have any notches to mount it more easily. And I see other advantages also with the insulation towards the wall. So there are reasons to make that in plastic, and you don't see the difference because honestly, other than us designers, nobody cares what this material behind it is. People don't even know. I mean, if I ask anybody that is not a designer, so what do you think? They would say, yeah, what, is that chrome? No, it's not chrome, it's just chrome plated, you know, chrome. To make the whole thing chrome would not be really feasible. And anyway, how is it less honest to plate the plastic with chrome than to plate the zinc with chrome? Who says that? Who decides that? In the end, it's us. It's up to us. This is a Bang & Olufsen device, a Danish hi-fi. It was really the top of the pops in the last century. You know, that's when there's a tuner and receiver that you listen to music to. And it was a company that really, in the time where everybody had as many glitzy chrome buttons as possible, they said, we want this machine here for people that like music and don't like electronics. So we just have on-off program stations, phono and volume. Not too many buttons. Under, there's a little flap. See the hinge? And behind that flap are some other modifications where you can preset the stations, etc. And I got the version in white plastic, but they had a wood one, and I said, is this real wood? And the guy said, yeah, it's 0.6 millimeter Palisander wood. And I thought, well, is that material honesty? Do you even know why there should be wood on a radio? It's from the time when people said, you know, the first radios were made of bakelite, which was kind of a thermoset plastic, before plastic was really around. And then they said, well, some people want not such a foreign, strange object in the living room. We make it like a piece of furniture, we make it in solid wood. And that's how radios and television sets were always in wood casings, and that's kind of a leftover. It's like when you order a new Tesla and you have a wood strip. It is because the first cars were made by the same people that build horse coaches, you know. They made them out of wood, and so that is still the carryover until today's time. 100 years later, there's still some wood in your Tesla. The Tesla is not made of wood, you know, but, you know, because it's coaches, right? John Wayne would have a blast. So, authenticity, an example. To be honest, I find it slightly offensive by Balenciaga to come up with a $2,000 bag. Okay, it's leather, yeah. But it's like sticking it into the face of someone. I think just let's stick it right back and pay $8 for the version on the right. Don't think that IKEA doesn't violate authenticity too. Here's a beautiful desk by a designer who was copied blatantly by IKEA years ago, and he sued them, and he won millions, and they had to take it out of their range of product. It's a product that obviously looks like IKEA could easily make that cheaply, but this is a $2,200 desk. It's a brilliant idea. You can put books in there, or you know, radio or whatever. It's really a nice product, and they just copied it. So they said, screw the authenticity, you know. Maybe they should stick to the plastic bags. I don't understand it, to be frank, and I'm sure if you're a manager at Omega, a product manager, you are not happy just because you belong, because Swatch and Omega and most of the Swiss luxury brands belong to SMH, Société Montre-Horloge Suisse. It's a big, giant company that owns a lot of brands. And they own the both, and they say, oh, let's have a ceramic Swatch that looks exactly like the Omega. It's just a lot cheaper. That's great for Swatch. Is it good for Omega? I don't know. You shake your head. You don't believe it either. I don't think so. And they did this thing again. They did it for Duncan. Same thing, it's just even more expensive. A $15,000 watch and you have basically the same watch face. Okay, the details in the watch face, the hands are not as nice. Of course not, you can't do that. So, that's authentic. The one on the right. But is it authentic if you can do the same thing for much less money? Is it not just overblown, what have you, celebrating the skills of traditional watchmen? Now, these companies, as you should know, have big worries. You know the biggest watch company in the world? Apple. Apple sells more watches than the entire Swiss watch industry. They have overtaken. I'm not making advertising it for Apple. No, I'm not. I think they don't need it. So they have a problem justifying either of these products. The watch industry has not always been very creative, so maybe they deserve, because their creativity has not always been on top level. This, which looks like a Mercedes star on a watch hand, it's actually not a Mercedes star. It's called a rising star, and it was at the time when it first appeared on Rolex watches. It was at the time when Mercedes also had their star developed, and they thought, okay, this is the earth and the water, the earth, water, and sky, I think. Not earth, wind, and fire, that's not something else. And it was there's a rumor that was the first product placement ever having Mercedes on a watch. No, that was not the case, it's just a rumor. But Rolex had it, and then lots of other brands had it too. You should know that Tudor is the cheaper brand. It's not really cheap, but the intro level brand from Rolex. But even respectable company like Tag Heuer and Omega have it, and Seiko, I see what you're doing there. You're not daring the real Mercedes, but you have to have the start. Do you really, in all your creative department, you don't have any other idea? When I talk about authenticity and when I think people try to make authentic design, make design first before you worry that it's authentic, Just give me something else here. Do something on your own. So the last part is cultural authenticity, and whenever you talk about culture, I think you're obliged to explain what you're talking about. What is culture? And again, I'm looking at dictionary, I find the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement. I am summing this up quickly into a two-liner. It's expressions, manifestations, and way of life of a group of people defined either by a geographic or social commonality. It's what you decide to do. You should think about what culture is, because you are producing culture. I really want you to be aware of that responsibility. You perhaps think, oh, I'm in so and so much semester and I'm going to graduate. No, you are the cultural elite of this country, and since this country is pretty important on this planet, you have obligations, you have challenges, and don't ever think of yourself as just a little designer. Yes, I'm just a little designer, I agree. But you are shaping the future. You are going to shape the future more than I am. I'm not at the beginning of my career, I'm towards the end. I'm not even wistful about it, it's just nature, So I've once been asked by one of you in one of my lectures at the end, how do I see the future in design? I thought that's very nice that you asked me, but you have to know that. For me, I have an opinion about it and I have to share that, but for you, you have to think, what is the future of design? What is the future of this planet? How do you want to influence it? What do you want to do with it? Because you want to be in a position to do that. And then the time when people ask you, you already have to have the answer. So start thinking now. So that's about culture. So what is authentic culture? And I hope that gets a bit funny. You know why I show this? It's the birth time of our profession. 5,000 years ago, pyramids were built with the help of architects. no designer around, absolutely none. Our profession started with the invention of James Watt's steam engine. Energy available everywhere, not only where you can put a windmill or a watermill, everywhere, and in abundance. And even with authentic Greek columns, if you think about that. Why did they put Greek columns on a steam engine by James Watt? Well, because the architecture at the time was classicistic, eclecticism, something like that. We have to make it a bit nice, right? So it doesn't look so scary, perhaps? I don't know. That's where our profession started. And it started in England. And so the first country that was industrializing was England. And Germany was a bit behind. And Germany's products were flooding the English market, and those were considered inferior. And so the English government decided to oblige Germany to label every product with made in Germany. That was 1890, around that time. Industrial Revolution, etc., etc. When I was a kid, I grew up in Germany. I always said, Made in Germany. Why is something in a foreign language put on a German product that is sold also in Germany? I didn't understand that. It's because of that. And basically the Brits wanted to protect British consumers, but also maybe keep the Germans out a bit. Well, with our, I don't want to brag as a German. As a German, you're never really so proud of your country because, we did some bad doings in the last century. But we started to produce quality goods, and we became famous for those quality goods. Even today, German cars, where I live in Corona del Mar, I have a lot of ritzy German cars. There's the Audis and the BMWs and Mercedes. Those poor suckers, they can't afford a Lamborghini or Rolls Royce. And even Rolls Royce is Tata now, right? Lamborghini is Audi, so you have to always know who owns what. So the authentic culture of German cars is important for the Germans and for the German industry. Another example, I found it. It's Starbucks Donpo stewed pork-flavored coffee that's sold in China. That raises questions about authenticity. And I think it raises three questions. Is that an authentic Starbucks? Is that authentic for Starbucks? Is that authentic for China? Do they usually drink coffee that tastes different? Or is it authentic for coffee? None of that. It's an innovation. So is it bad? Even if it's totally non-authentic. So authentic doesn't always have to be a good thing, or the absence of it not always a bad thing. Sometimes in my lectures, I may confuse people because at the end they say, oh, well, what did Wolfgang say now? Does he think authentic is good or bad? Thank you for asking that question to yourself and spend your life answering it, because that's what I want you to do. I want you to think. I can't think for you. I can show you things, but I can't think for you. Now we come to the part where I had some discussion, and my girlfriend doesn't care to be mentioned several times in one evening, but I have to because she really disapproves. I said, okay, let me randomly pick 3 images that show authentic American, French, and German things. And Duck Dynasty. You have to know that I have a cousin in California. I don't have a lot of contact, but I know that she loves Duck Dynasty. She thinks those guys are really cool, and I'm not going to comment. And when you think of French people, you may think of good-looking, elegantly dressed people smoking. And of course, when we think of German people, we think of sauerkraut and lederhosen. Okay, right? Full disclosure, I possessed lederhosen at the age of 5. They're fantastic because they never get torn. And once a week, you turn the cuffs down and all the dirt falls out. So very easy maintenance. And I don't know where my parents, because my parents are from the south, where in Hamburg, in the north where I live, where they found those lederhosen. But I don't know. Is this authentic? Duck hunting originates in Egypt, 2000 before Christ. Smoking is of Aztec origin, 5000 before Christ. And lederhosen, partially every prehistoric hunter wore leather skin pants, but they actually were reintroduced by American settlers into Europe, taken from Native Americans. And my girlfriend should be happy, she is an 8th Choctaw, I think. So you see what supposedly is authentic American or French or German, in truth dates back to something else, and the conclusion we can make is that culture bridges continents, social groups, and also bridges time. It's permanently adapted and adopted. You know, people always modify their work with it because culture belongs to no one and to everyone at the same time. Really, it's not that you can say my culture because you have adopted it. You've adopted it by birth or by interest. That's your choice, and we have that choice because we are free human beings. Nobody can tell us that we're not allowed to adopt a culture. Going back to American, authentic American culture. You know Remington and his sculpture, that's considered authentic American, correct? Have you seen any of his sculptures? Yeah, Ronald Reagan had one on his desk in a museum, or friends have that.
I don't know, I have a computer sculpture of a railman guy like looking at a watch, but I don't know if that counts.
A what guy?
You know, like railway stuff.
Oh, right, yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And what you could ask though, that's not the origin of America, it dates back further, you know? That's at least as authentic, you know, the teepee. And again, there's a little story involving my girlfriend behind it. It's the last story my girlfriend is going to be mentioned here. When we met and we decided to move in together, you know, there's always an issue, particularly when you're a designer. You have your taste in furniture, you know? And she said, Wolfgang, you can be so happy that my taste is not early American. I said, early American? I'd never heard of it. Is that a teepee? I seriously asked that question. And she was referring to the stuff on the left. I would have been more interested in that, and of course she's not into early American music. She's more Scandinavian taste, because her sister moved to Oslo. So. Shaker chair, very elegant chair, and this, and please help me again to jump from the rooster to the donkey, reminds me of the Superleggera chair in Italy. That is still one of the lightest chairs around. It weighs about 3 pounds, and they tested the stability at the time, the designer who did it, by throwing it out the third floor of the factory to see, you know, to make it just stable enough that you can rely on it, sit on it, and look how elegant it is. I don't compare them negatively because the one on the left is from 1950, so if you want to be fair, you have to compare it to Charles Eames, you know? 1957, 1950, and that Charles Eames, also very elegant, very minimalist. Maybe not quite as lightweight, but that was not the point that Charles Eames wanted to make. And then jumping back in time, again, an authentic American design is the Adirondack chair, and I think one could spend a whole evening just talking about that chair. It's fascinating. I've started to write a book on chairs, which I'll probably never finish because bookmaking is not that much fun when it goes to really printing and selling it. I'm really not interested in that part. And the chair is from 1905, and you know, somebody just said, okay, I want to use all the wood of one plank and make a chair out of it, using it as efficiently as possible, and also having a horizontal armrest so you can put a drink on it, which I really think is a great idea. It's just that then, of course, there's a plastic version around. Is that still an authentic Adirondack chair? Because there is so far no authentic chair because the guy who invented it didn't patent it. That was somebody else who decided to mass produce it. But it's something that essentially doesn't have to be mass produced. I mean, you can download from the internet a plan, you can make it in your own workshop. Is that then an authentic Adirondack chair, even if you make that in California? Or is the plastic one, which may be produced in the Adirondacks, more authentic? Or if you asked Photoshop to show you an authentic Adirondack chair as a prompt, it spits out that. It doesn't understand anything. you know. It doesn't understand that, yeah, you're not using that wood efficiently there, why do you cut it so often? And then please explain those armrests, and my beer is going to fall off. And I don't even drink beer, and I'm German. And then there's some weird things going on. Another version showed even a rocking base that didn't rock because there were also 4 legs. So AI is not always ready enough for that. Anyway, who decides what is authentic? And who decides what is real? One problem with that is that there's an actual reality, and then there's a perceived reality. And sometimes they collide. You know? When we're mentally sick, it collides. When we forget, we misremember something, that collides. When we look at it from the wrong angle, we haven't seen that there was a guy in front of the car that was run over and we thought it was somebody else's fault. There can be lots of reasons why these two worlds collide. When we talk about the law, that's where we try to establish an actual reality, something that we can all agree on, something that really happened. That's why legal processes are very important in a society, that we can rely on them. But for us designers, perceived realities are very important because we sell stuff based on that. One of the nicest things of reality is beauty. And if you think how beauty has been described over the centuries by poets and so on, the number 4 is probably the most famous one. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And for us designers, beauty is and should be important. How can we create something beautiful when we are not the people deciding about it, but the people that we offer the results to? This is a bad joke. When you go to a young designer, you go in the client meeting and the client says, my wife doesn't like the design. Why does he say that? Because he doesn't dare to defend his own aesthetical. Well, we're talking about the old time, okay? Not equal women in the room. No, there's just the boss of the company and he is a man. And he's in Schwaben, in Germany, and he is very traditional. And he doesn't want to talk about his taste, so he says, my wife doesn't like it. So you suggest next time, send your wife, we save a lot of time, you know, you don't even need to come. You don't say that because it's impolite, you want to keep him as a client. But you suggest that you reflect all together whether the person deciding wouldn't be a target group and whether there are members of the target group available that this could be tested with. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder or in the eye of the target group. This is a photo that I think is very classy. It's made by Jean-Paul Goud from Grace Jones from the 80s. It's before you were conceived. And it's an original artwork and photo, as much as a photo can be. You know, today they say, oh, it's an original print printed by the artist. You know, it's not done by a photo lab. No, he himself went into the dark room and did it, for example. But it's all based, I don't want to say on a lie, but nobody can have this position, you know. He asked Grace Jones to take position. He had an idea, a sketch, and he asked her to pose, and then he didn't even use Photoshop. He pasted it around and had it retouched to look like the final result. And the final result is an authentic artwork. A personal encounter with authenticity. I designed that 20-some years ago for my Swiss client Jura. And you should know, because you probably don't, that at the time when you asked 10, and again I apologize for that stereotype, women, because men in Switzerland don't iron, they buy a Mercedes, and then on the way home they buy a Jura iron, so their wives have something like 2. It's weird, it's disgusting. You don't have to reduce it because it's changing. Thank God. But they asked me to design an iron because of 10 women, 7 would say Jura when you mention iron, because it was a brand recognition that I've never seen of other products in that area in any other country. So it was a very honorable job to do that. And I said, okay, I lived on the Geneva Lake, and Switzerland has many lakes, so the water tank also in a very expressive design. The tank has these waves. It was the only iron that has a chrome-plated steel sole, so I showed it in the front of it sticking out to really show that extra value that you get there. It's very precise with the line work, etc., to show the Swiss precision that you expect from this product. It's just there for, iron and clothes. And it was a good success. But what really puzzled me is that the client told me that they sold 250,000 of these irons through another brand in the United States. That's a pretty good success, 250,000. So what puzzled me is that, it was meant to be very Swiss, and those Americans were not even told that it's a Swiss iron, It was sold under Toastmaster brand, I think. So for me, that was a proof that maybe it's more important that a product has a character than that is a true character, or really representing what you want to represent. Maybe just that it was so expressive was good enough to make it successful, rather than being bland or generic. That is important when you look at computer-generated design. Oh, I have low battery. Help. 10% left. Well, we might need some help then. So what changes for us? We're coming to the end. The design process, of course. Design process is characterized by being partially artistic and partially scientific. The scientific part is systematic, it's plannable, very important when you discuss budget with a client, and the constraints are existing. Any artistic process, not only of designers but also of artists, is erratic, chaotic, and don't see this as pejorative. It's good, it's good to be chaotic. It's not linear. Don't think straight. It's not always plannable. That's more difficult to sell to a client, so just ask them for a bit more time. And the constraints are self-defined. So you decide yourself what you accept as limitations. The chronological order of the design process: you do research, you do analysis, you create, you select among the things you've created, and you present. Let me sum up research and analysis and call it a briefing. Bon. The presentation, time-wise, is the smallest aspect. It's just an hour and a half, even when you work 2 months on a project. So let's focus on these 3 things. The briefing is an analytic process. You collect the constraints and you establish, when you say thinking outside or inside the box, you establish and describe that box. In the creation, you have a synthetic process. You ignore the constraints and you think outside the box. And in the selection, again, you analyze what you have created. You verify, does it meet my expectations, my briefing expectations? You verify the box. What I want you to concentrate on in view of AI, artificial intelligence, because I think artificial intelligence hits most in the central part, the briefing, the question to ask, what am I going to design? In which direction am I going to work? You have to focus on that. You have to become really good at that. Because that cannot be so easily replaced. I won't tell you it can never be replaced because I can't look into the future. And if you have seen Will Smith eating spaghetti a year ago and what AI can do today, you've seen the incredible progress. I don't think that progress is going to slow down. So all kinds of things can happen. The other thing is, you be the judge of what AI generates. What is usable and why? That, again, cannot easily be taken away. So you have to learn how to define and how to verify. And to define, you need common sense, but you also need dreams. You need to have a vision. What do you want the world to look like? Is the Cybertruck from Tesla a good idea, or is it stupid? You have to have an opinion about that. I don't want to hide my opinion. It's complex, because first of all, these people have real cojones to come up with a thing like that. It doesn't correspond to anything they've done before, and it doesn't correspond to what people expect from a pickup truck. So it's already, wow, courage, always good. Is that what do we want to live in a world where we need that kind of car? not me to be honest, you know, it looks very dystopian and not very friendly. It doesn't look human scale to me. For verification, aside the ability, you know, to check whether something really fits into briefing, you need taste. You need to say, is that good? Again, you know, you control your vision. Is it what I want the world to look like? If that is the answer to the question that I asked, should I reformulate the question again and start all over, or can I be happy with that result? When it's about the creation, if you generate, you need creativity. But you've seen AI can at least replace what I would almost call the mechanical part of the creative. What do I mean with mechanical part? Have you heard about the Osborne method? Which, by the way, is a good method when you get stuck on a design project. You say, I don't know what to do if I have to design a lemon press until next week because Dave Tudor wants that, or I don't know what you want better. The Osborne method says, okay, you can just apply these things that simplify you. You can adapt, fit, change, enlarge parts, reduce parts. You can replace, rearrange them. You can reverse them. You can combine them. And if you go through that systematically, you will come to ideas. But that's exactly what AI can do very easily, I think. You can easily program AI to do that. Write an algorithm for that. So you need to be the person that goes beyond that. You can jump from the rooster to the donkey. Because you should not think straight. Don't think straight. And random is not the opposite of straight. You know, random, that's what AI can do very well. Oh, randomized. So how do I explain it? Think about the box. So you're supposed to think outside the box. What can you observe when you look at the metaphor of the box? It has a space. And that space is defined by things that the client knows. When you meet a client, they have experience with their product. They've made it for, say, 50 years. They know that this is more expensive if you do it like that. There's some clients that think there's only one way how to do our product, is the way we do it. Otherwise, we would have done it differently. And 20 years ago, we tried it once, and it didn't work. Well, in 20 years, a lot of things can happen. Maybe today it makes sense. This is where you come in. But when you look at the space is defined. Now you look outside. The space is unlimited outside. And that's the problem of AI. Which part of that, because AI has its own boxes and will always have that. AI can create all kind of random stuff, but it won't have some ideas that you can have. So which part will AI not touch? And how can you touch that? That is what I would think about. Who decides the box anyway? The client. And how does the client decide? There are technical and aesthetic aspects. There's physics, manufacturing, ergonomics, environmental. I name that under technical and aesthetic sides, which includes marketing, brand image, history, and expectations. So it's not that the client is stupid. You never think that people are stupid. And you're not always hired for your intelligence. You're hired for your creativity, you know. If I perhaps wouldn't make it if I'd be hired for my intelligence. Come on, I'm only a designer, you know. If I would be more intelligent, I would study mathematics a lot. And how boring would that be? So how do we respond to that challenge? Well, as I mentioned before, you know, consider the box. Consider what you can do, what AI cannot do. And I show you some examples where I invited OpenArt AI to design coffee machines because, you know, I'm a coffee machines guy. I'm just in the process of designing a coffee machine, but it's too far advanced, I won't use any of that. I said, okay, modern design. I have to go on my glasses because I can't read, it's too far away, there, my prompts. Sleek modern design. And I was disappointed, you know, that looks all totally generic. Completely boring. And what I call bottom left the C shape, you know, you have some apparatus thing there with the water tank and then the stand for the cups. So I said, okay, obviously I have to get better prompts, you know, so I say unconventional. How conventional is that? It didn't really impress me. The coffee does funny things up there. I said, okay, Art Deco, you know, I like Art Deco. And yeah, that's interesting there with the ornament glass. That gives me an idea. We could have ornament glass on the side of plexiglass, you know. So yes, that can inspire me. That's how I can use that. I can't show this. Steampunk, you know, I want to see what a steampunk, I like steampunk. Steampunk is crazy. I would never design steampunk, but I love it, you know. And I said, okay, ancient Egyptian architecture. I was very disappointed. There's no pyramid shape here, you know. I was expecting more. It's just a decoration on the side. And I said, okay, Richard Rogers. Who is Richard Rogers? Architect at the Centre Pompidou. He does this exoskeleton architecture where the installations on the outside. That would have been an opportunity, of course, completely unsafe with the hot steam going outside, but I would have expected something more interesting than that. Then I said, okay, do this one. Norman Foster, I'm running out of battery here real soon. I have 5% left. The inventor of the gherkin, you know, architect. If you look at the product on the right, I found that very interesting. That's sleek, that's elegant. There's no space for the water. But you know, I can take this out, I can 3D construct it, and here I'm inspired. But that's a cool looking design. Oh yeah, that's Santiago Calatrava, and you know he did the Path Station in New York, and that's nothing like this. But if you ask me, I really like the coffee machine on the right there. The simplicity, it's really nice proportions. So that's an inspiration for me. So what do these images do? Honestly, they take away the necessity to hire a young designer or a bad second-term student who doesn't fully understand what you're saying, but you can do some stuff. So don't be bad, okay? You really need to be much better than you used to need to be. That shouldn't be scary. You're here. Not everybody gets into the school. You have great teachers. You can make it. But you have to know that there's a challenge. This is Karim Rashid. I can't read it from here. It's way too small. I'm not made for this angle. And quite successful how he got this shape from his lamp. I didn't prompt with a lamp. I just say Karim Rashid. And I think, yeah, it's a usable machine. And also the Philip Stark, before I always said chrome and black, and here I didn't say that, and Philip Stark, I knew it came with orange. And the one on the left, I would totally show to a client. I think that's an interesting looking machine. And you all have different ideas what you like or not. Then finally it gets a little bit more sculptural when I said Luna vessel, you know. It shows these shapes, or Captain Nemo, Nautilus, submarine. Okay, it doesn't all make sense, and of course it gets steampunky, which is the Nautilus, you know. And then I said, you know, inspired by beer stuff, and of course there's no coffee coming out, now it's beer coming out. No, that's not what I mean. Also, beer is not spelled with 3 E. AI seems to be completely stupid once about typography and any written words. It's very disconcerting. I have no idea how long it took me to get the intro slide with authentic. Military, it doesn't understand military. It's a bog standard coffee machine, it's just olive green. So I said, make it rugged military with camo. Okay, it understands camo color, but you know, it's not, it's a little bit more rugged, but I wanted some elements from Humvee. Okay, I should prompt Humvee, I know. I did that, by the way. One of the things and it wasn't very Humvee-ish either. Arnold Schwarzenegger wouldn't have liked it. That I like. That's a truck engine. I'm not sure it's a truck engine, but it's a nice design. I like the looks of it. I would show these. That's brass instrument. Then that's saxophone jazz, right? I think there's really something interesting happening. I'm always intrigued when it gets more sculptural, you know. I'm disappointed that mostly it doesn't dare to do that. And this is, oh yeah, sorry, this is, let me get back, losing my track. I said, there are so many good student projects around. Maybe I can prompt interest in design studies from students. And comes up with that. I know that you could do better. So the problem of AI, it has this vast knowledge of everything that exists already. And you as a designer have a chance to go beyond that. And I trust we as humans can, at least for a couple of more years, be better at that than AI. So, summing up, I find that the AI-suggested design is decorative. It's not really sculpturally innovative. It's always very well presented. So sorry, no more excuse for bad presentation. You cannot afford to not present well. Nobody's going to say, oh, that looks so lousy. It must be original, authentic, human. Nobody's going to appreciate that. And it lacks consideration for technical requirements, which is the easiest to correct. And I'm not worried about that. That will happen. So my advice to you, be authentic, be yourself. Everyone else has already taken this, not my idea to formulate like that, but it's smart. Be creative, be daring, explore the borders of creativity, and don't confuse prejudice with knowledge. Always research, find out what's behind. Don't think Americans are Duck Dynasty. I never thought that. Just follow that. And yourself, because when you choose your identity, make it a nice one. This world needs good people. It will be more fun to work with you. Your clients will appreciate when you're a good person. Explore the borders of creativity, and as a hint, there are none. That does not mean you shouldn't explore. I mean, Columbus was looking for God knows what, and ended up in America discovering it. He wanted to go to India. Don't care about whether the borders are there or not, just go out and explore. And then prejudice are bad. The French word for prejudice is idée reçue, that means received ideas. Received from whom? It's better than preconceived. It means somebody planted it in your head. Don't be content with that. Find out on your own.